A woman drives her stepson, Elijah, to his aunt's house. Elijah calls his stepmom by her name, Mary Ann. His father has recently passed away, and they are visiting her sister in Burlington before they permanently move to California. Elijah sits in the back seat, playing a video game on Mary Ann's phone. She tries to start a conversation, but Elijah remains quiet. Then she asks him to return her phone and talk to her. She mentions the local zoo in Burlington, saying she knows how much he enjoys it. Elijah replies that there are much better zoos in California, but he doesn't like going without his father. Mary Ann tells him that she misses her husband too. While they talk, Mary Ann misses her turn because the GPS is broken. She asks Elijah to give her a map from her purse, but he finds a letter with his name on it. Mary Ann quickly takes the letter away before he can read it. She makes a U-turn to get back on the right path while Elijah keeps asking her about the letter. As they pass a nearby mailbox, it shakes, suggesting something strange has happened. Suddenly, a high-pitched noise shatters the car's windshield and startles them. An old model fighter plane flies directly overhead and crashes right in front of them. Elijah jumps out to see the crash, and Mary Ann follows. She calls 911 while Elijah tells her the pilot is still inside. Mary Ann rushes to the plane and tries to open the latch. With explosions happening all around, she manages to help the pilot open the hatch and escape the cockpit. The pilot then goes back inside to grab a picture of a woman before leaving his plane. Elijah hugs Mary Ann while the pilot appears disoriented and confused. He tries to get his bearings, but finds everything looks different. He tells Mary Ann that his name is Lieutenant Ted from the 2nd Squadron. He asks her if they are British or Dutch. Mary Ann replies that they are American, which confuses Ted even more. He wonders what the Americans are doing in Burma. Elijah tells him this is Ohio, not Burma. Ted insists he was just fighting over that ridge and points in a direction, but there is no ridge, leaving him even more confused. Then he sees a sign that says Dayton, the town where he grew up. Helplessly, Ted kneels down, clearly lost and unsure of what is happening. In the sky, a colorful hole appears, which is where Ted came through. Later, the three of them are taken to a hospital, where a sheriff named Parker listens to Mary Ann. The sheriff notices Elijah calling her by her name and asks what is going on. She explains that he is her stepson. Elijah sneaks into Ted's room and sees a tag that says Dayton, Ohio. Ted quickly wakes up and grabs Elijah's hand. He asks Elijah why all the guards are after him, and Elijah tells him they think he is a bad guy. Ted feels devastated because he claims he was fighting the bad guys. Realizing he is in Ohio, Ted thinks he has been shipped home and missed Christmas. Elijah tells him it is only September, but Ted insists it is December 24th, 1941, Christmas Eve. Ted then decides to leave and asks Elijah for help. He even gives him a Whiz chocolate bar from his jacket pocket, saying it is his wife's gift for good luck. Elijah does not recognize this type of chocolate, and Ted assures him it is very famous. Elijah puts the chocolate in his pocket, saying he can't eat candy from strangers. He tells Ted that he will ask Mary Ann if it is okay to eat it. The officers bang on the door after seeing Ted awake. He tells Elijah that the sheriff, Simmons, is in town, and that if they head down to Main Street, they can explain his situation. Just then, officers enter with a nurse and give Ted a sedative. Elijah and Mary Ann continue driving, and he tries to convince her to go to Main Street, insisting that Ted needs their help. He mentions that the Whiz bars Ted gave him stopped being made over 30 years ago. Hesitantly, Mary Ann turns toward Main Street to look for Simmons. Behind them, military cars rush to the crash site. The man in charge, Bill, instructs his team to leave no screws behind as they have only 7 hours left. He calls the hospital, warning them not to let anyone talk to Ted, and orders a road closure near the crash site. Bill points his tablet to the opening Ted came through, and his assistant, Nina, suggests the pilot holds the key to the mystery. Bill orders her to find the pilot. Elijah and Mary Ann arrive at the station on Main Street. Mary Ann asks for Chief Simmons, but the chief there, McClarty, says he knows nothing of him. While Elijah distracts the chief by throwing a signed baseball, he grabs an old picture from a display case that shows Ted. Outside, he shows it to Mary Ann, but she insists the photo is from 1938, making it impossible for Ted to be in it. Meanwhile, Ted wakes up to military presence outside. When the nurse enters his room, he quickly gives him the sedative and sneaks outside, searching for his clothes. Outside his room, Nina asks the police if she can take Ted. As Ted finds his clothes, Nina enters his room and discovers the nurse naked in his place. Ted sees modern jets and cars, feeling confused. He tries to get into a car, setting off the alarm. Nina hears it and realizes it's Ted. He then spots a familiar motorcycle, takes it from its owner, and leaves, leaving Nina and her team astonished. Next, Bill organizes a large operation to recover every part of the plane that came through the opening, aware of the gravity of the situation. Milberg, the head of the scavenging team, questions what happens if they fail to send everything back. Bill tells Milberg to just fix the plane as he doesn't really want to share this top-secret information. Meanwhile, Elijah and Marianne argue over whether the person in the picture is Ted. Marianne believes it might be Ted's grandfather. Later, she gets out of the car to cool off, and Elijah reads the letter she hid. Furious, he realizes it is his acceptance letter to elementary school in Burlington, indicating she is leaving him with his aunt while she moves to California. Marianne says she promised his dad to do what's best for him. Elijah questions if he has caused her so much trouble, but she insists this isn't about him. He gets back in the car, and they drive away. In the car, Marianne reassures Elijah that his aunt will take care of him, but he asks who will take care of her since he hears her crying every night. Suddenly, Ted crashes into their car before they can finish their conversation. Elijah jumps out and insists this must be a sign since they crashed into him twice. He shows Ted the picture, and Ted identifies everyone in it. Marianne decides to help Ted, who tells them he is heading home to his wife. Despite all the changes, he finds his house and calls for his wife, Pauline, multiple times, but only her nurse answers. He claims to be her husband, but she doesn't believe him. Elijah says he is an old friend of Pauline's, and the nurse informs them that Pauline is alive and will return soon from her pottery class. Ted is thrilled to hear this, but soon sees pictures on the wall showing that Pauline has remarried and started a family. Devastated, Ted steps outside. Now convinced of his truthfulness, Marianne searches for Ted's obituary online, which states he crashed in Burma and was killed trying to avoid capture. Meanwhile, the nurse spots Elijah and Marianne on the news and alerts the police. Soon, the military arrives, demanding Ted leave the house. When he steps out, Bill tells him they are here to fix things and send him back to where he belongs. Suddenly, a small earthquake strikes, and Nina explains it is happening because Ted is here. She reveals that he traveled to the future through something called the Rift. Bill urges Ted to return through the Rift while it's still open so he can reunite with Pauline. However, Elijah rushes to him, warning that he will die if he goes back, showing him his obituary. Elijah leads Ted to the car, and they drive away as the military follows, but Ted uses his knowledge of the terrain to evade them. But before they can get far, a tire goes flat, forcing them to continue on foot. Ted shows Elijah where he and Pauline had their last dance. He tells Elijah he should let Bill send him back because he doesn't belong here. Ted feels sad that Pauline has moved on, but Elijah insists he can't go back. Frustrated, Ted asks why it matters so much to Elijah that he stays. Elijah reveals that his father was also a soldier and pilot who recently passed away in Afghanistan. Elijah then suggests there might be a way for Ted to return to the past and survive. If Ted uses modern military equipment, like guns and vests, he might not die in the war. Elijah believes this is why the Rift brought Ted here, and Ted sees it as a second chance. Meanwhile, Bill and Nina take Marianne to their facility, explaining this isn't the first time such an event has occurred. They are fixing the plane so Ted can fly back into the past through the Rift. Ted tells Elijah that on his first date with Pauline, they found a good luck charm in a Cracker Jack box. When they bought their house, Pauline pinned the charm to the mantle, which was missing when they visited her house. Ted realizes that Pauline doesn't want to remember him. Meanwhile, Marianne refuses to cooperate with Bill, believing they are sending Ted to die. She argues that the future hasn't changed, so Ted being here isn't a problem. Bill counters that each time the Rift sends something to the present, major natural disasters occur, killing thousands. Every disaster is connected to the Rift. Marianne then tells them to track Elijah through her phone. Ted and Elijah head to a local weapon shop, but it is closed. Meanwhile, Bill and his men are heading to Elijah's location. Nina explains that every time they fail to prevent a disaster, it is because they missed a button or a cuff link, something very tiny. However, Nina believes that it has nothing to do with those small details, as she thinks the Rift does what it does for a reason. She tells Marianne that the Rift stays open for exactly 11 hours, and Ted needs to do something during this time to prevent the disaster. Soon, Bill and his men catch up with Ted and Elijah, who tried to run after hearing the police siren. Marianne approaches them, and Ted tells her that he is willing to go, but needs some weapons. Marianne explains everything to Ted and Elijah, telling them that everyone, including Pauline, will die if he doesn't leave now exactly the way he came. She emphasizes that he arrived at this exact place and time for a reason, and they take him to Pauline. When Ted meets the older Pauline, he asks for her forgiveness for leaving without saying goodbye due to superstitions. He explains that it was believed that not saying goodbye means someone never really left. He tells her that she may have forgotten about him, but he will always love her. As he prepares to leave, Pauline shows him the good luck charm that she wears on a chain around her neck, along with his picture. They then dance for one last time. Ted then heads to his plane. Marianne tells him that she can't take Elijah with her because she can't even take care of herself after her husband died, and looking at Elijah reminds her of him. Ted explains that the rift could have brought him to this place because Pauline is there, but it took him to this time for a reason, so that he could meet her. He tells her that his story and her husband's story are not so different, and this must be her husband's message to her. Before Ted takes off, he remembers the chocolate bar he gave to Elijah and asks him to return it. Elijah only has the wrapper, as he has eaten it. While everyone panics, Ted reassures them that the rift isn't about bringing everything back, but about delivering what the rift intended to do, and he believes he has accomplished that. With only 5 minutes remaining, Ted gets on his plane and takes off. Elijah cries as he watches Ted ascend, and Marianne thanks him for showing her the right path. Ted places Pauline's picture back in its spot and flies into the rift. The rift then disappears, and everyone celebrates. The movie ends with Elijah sitting in the front seat alongside Marianne instead of the back, and they head to California together. Thanks for watching. Please like the video and subscribe the Explanation Pro for more upcoming videos.